When you're restocking your inventory, you don't want to buy too much because it's pretty expensive, but you definitely don't want to run out of product. And that's why you have this calculation of how much do you use, but also have a safety stock in there. Let's talk a bit more about that. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel, where we talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And today's video, well, in fact, at the time of filming, I am not yet at 1000 subscribers. But I think that at the time of release of this video, I will be. And that is because I know that there is a certain number of subscribers finding my channel every week, every day. And based on how many of you have found me over the last weeks, I can make a pretty good estimation that by the time this video goes live, I will have reached that 1000, that sort of magical limit, which of course really makes me happy. Thank you for following me, for showing me that you care about what I put on the internet, on YouTube, and I really hope that you enjoy my videos. But it also made me think about an important part that we have within Lean, a little bit of Six Sigma, but especially within this more inventory management, flow management way of thinking. And then the crossover to Six Sigma comes because we're going to add a whole bunch of statistics. Well, not too much statistics in this one. It's not as many standard deviations as usual, but they will be in here. So that's a small spoiler alert for you. Now, the safety stock, what does it do? I've tried to visually describe, what do we do with inventory management, and there's a couple of strange points on this graph here. So let's first go through the basic setup of how you have your inventory and you use it. So you have your demand and then you have an order point and a lead time, and then you get new stuff. So in this graph, this is basically time, and this is the amount of stock we have in our warehouse. And the purple line, that is how much of this specific item we have in stock at a certain moment in time. So you see we start with a pretty full warehouse and we use a little bit, we demand some stuff every day. And if we just continue to produce more and not order, at some point we will hit zero and we cannot produce anymore. So that's why at some point we order new stuff to make sure that we can continue production. Now that reordering, that happens on the upper dotted line. So in fact here we reorder a certain amount to make sure that at some point in the future we again get enough. We place the order, it's not here yet, so we just continue to consume, and hey, our order arrives, we have a lot of new stock again. And then the same goes, oh, we already order here, we have a certain lead time, so we continue to use it, but then, there comes our order. And this one, well, for those who already know the calculations, and I now see it, I cheated a little bit with this one, but one of the things to first think about, and you will see very often this parallel thingy, what is it, the parallelogram, well, that's a Dutch word anyway, that I'm going to draw here at the order point. At the reorder point, this is the quantity you're going to order. And that quantity is so that when you reorder, you come back to what's basically your max inventory. You calculate that by adding the predicted extra demand you're going to have by the multiplying it by the predicted lead time of your order. So basically what you're trying to do is add this line up here, which by the way is the reason that this one isn't completely correct, because it should have added only this line. You of course don't know what's going to happen here. So here you reorder, and you see here I drew a slightly bigger reorder, and that is not completely correct, but every time you reorder. Now you also see that I reorder in such a way that it doesn't hit zero. And that's because the first one I drew is sort of the average I had, over the last weeks. We had this type of demand, and I keep this safety stock, and that is this is the safety stock. Let me also just mark it red, easier to remember. That safety stock, and it is for when you suddenly have a period with a much higher demand. Maybe there's a nice promo and your factory really needs to produce more product and get it out of the door, and you just continue producing. Or you have a longer lead time. So it takes longer between ordering your ingredients and actually getting it at your site. So for those things, we add a little bit of extra buffer, this safety stock, and we can calculate it, as always, with statistical calculations and practice. We know that when things completely change, when you really have humongous orders and you never work in the weekends, but now 3 weeks in a row, every weekend you just continue stamping out product, this is not gonna work. But it does take into account, let's say, normal variance. And what is normal variance? That's what this video is about. That is, how do we calculate this safety stock to sort of get almost all of those problems in there. So there is a formula for that. Let me first write it down, and then we'll go over the parts and what they are. So that is quite an interesting formula. But let's just get down into all of the nitty-gritty details. And I think the best one to start with are the L and the D. Now the L is the lead time. Let's put it over here. So the lead time that we expect, and the average here, the bar, so the average lead time that we saw over the last so many periods. So that's also again a thing. Don't do this only based on your last order. Please take half a year, however long your production has been stable and your lead times. Take that period and extrapolate from there. Don't just take the last 1 or 2 deliveries. The D is this angle, so this demand angle. The D is that speed of your demand, so the speed of consumption of your items. We'll continue a bit within this huge square root here. The lead time we multiply by the standard deviation. Remember, the sigma is the standard deviation of the demand speeds that we have seen. So if we take this sawtooth a couple of times, again, take this half a year, but you take it a couple of times, and then what you see is that there will be different speeds. And in fact, you can do this based on a week, you can do this based on days, or however your production works. Many of the products that we make at my current factory, and they have a one weekly production. So checking demand day by day is going to be a pretty useless exercise, because I know that 4 days a week, or in fact 6 days a week, the demand will be 0 and then suddenly very steep. So for those products, a week-on-week comparison is much better, and where in the week they are placed, well, that's up to the production planning. But I also, with the factory I worked with previously, we basically made, well, sort of the same product every day, different recipes, but 90% of the ingredients was the same for every product, with very slight modifications. And then suddenly a daily calculation becomes much more interesting. Anyway, what you do is you choose your relevant time period, and then you pick the demand in each of those relevant periods, and you get your standard deviation of the demand. So the variation, the standard deviation that you have in your demand level. Your average demand is the average of all of those periods that you've sampled. And then the standard deviation of the lead time is, of course, well, maybe your suppliers are not very stipped every time. They are not really delivering in 2 days, no more, no less. Sometimes it takes a bit longer, sometimes they are a bit faster. So there also might be standard deviation. So you will see that if your supplier is very, very accurate in their lead time predictions, and they're basically always the same, then this becomes 0 and the whole right term falls out. if your production is completely leveled and your demand is just the same every day, this whole term falls out. So that already, it's sort of the first test, so to say, that we are not going to ensure ourselves against things that don't have much variation to start with. But what does the formula here say? It is when we have, and I did forget to add one square here, when we have variation in the demand, we take this standard deviation and we square it. So basically we make it a variation again, but we square the standard deviation of the demand and we multiply that by our average lead time. So we take this expected lead time, and if our demand has variation, we multiply those two to add in a component for this increased or decreased demand. And in this case, especially, of course, the increased demand, that is the important part for us. You see, this here should have gone like so. But we have some higher or lower demand. And to guard against this, we use that term, the average lead time times the standard deviation squared of the demand. And why does this make sense? Well, if you have variation in your demand, you simply have to multiply that variation by the expected lead time to know how much extra safety stock you have to put into your warehouse, into your calculations. And what you, by the way, will see relatively often is sort of this formula. You get Z, I'll get to Z in a bit, but that's the simple one. Z times your expected lead time times the variation in demand. That is when you do not expect, so that formula purely formally does not expect any variation in the lead time. You see it quite often also on the internet. Then what we add to this is indeed that variation in the lead time idea. And here we take the square of the average demand. Now it's not that we per se square the average demand, it is because we will then root it again. This gives us the full demand times the standard deviation of our lead time. So basically what we say here is, look, if that lead time suddenly becomes longer or shorter, and especially, of course, longer, because shorter, well, okay, we get a bit more inventory, but so be it. We'll use it up again and correct it at the next reorder point. But if it becomes longer, we are going to consume our demand. So we are going to really eat into the demand. With the lead time, we only get the square root of that. We already ordered, and we have the full variation of our demand. Now, these two added together, so average of lead time times the square of the demand standard deviation plus the square of your average demand times the square of the standard deviation of your lead time, this all gets square rooted. That gives us a big part of our safety stock. This is basically I would say this is the complex part of the safety stock, although it is also a bit intuitive if you think of, I have some variation in how fast I eat through my stock, and I have some variation in how soon after I order do I get my stuff back, my new inventory. And then there is this Z term, and the Z term for those following Six Sigma a bit, well, this is indeed very much linked to this whole 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 standard deviations and the percentage of security that we want. Basically, this is the inverse normal distribution of the safety percentage. Let's put it like that you want. So based on this formula, and you have historical data, if you want to have 95% certainty that you will not get to 0, then you pick the inverse normal distribution of 95%, which is about 1.6. So you take this whole factor and you multiply it by 1.6. And if you go higher in percentages, if you go to 99, it will become a lot bigger. If you are okay with 90% and you say, 10% of the time we'll just switch up our production planning a little bit, have a small delay in delivery. And this might now, from sort of a lean guru, sound completely bonkers, but if you do this on a day-to-day level, it might in many factories be quite acceptable to say, 10% of the time, we're just gonna move the planning along a little bit. And we know it in advance, right? Things have been already counted and you see that your stock is declining. So it's not that it suddenly hits you when you're doing your work correctly. So a lower percentage for some organizations might be completely acceptable. Technically, if you go to 50%, then this becomes 1. So this here terms as well, 50% of the time you'll be completely okay. That I would not recommend, but it'll be something between 1.28 and 1.6, maybe up to 2.5 or so if you really go to the upper end around the 99%ish. So that is the Z value. Look it up in a table or let Excel calculate it. It's inverse normal distribution of the percentage of security that you want. Now that you add to your basic stock level, because of course this reordering and the reorder point, all of that you do want to order your demand and the time between orders, right? That is the basic way you do it. So what you have is the time between getting your stuff, but that is basically, let's put it in green. It'll make it this very messy graph maybe a little bit easier to read. You have this time between the points that you use, right? So this here, your top. And we said this is your usage period and until you really get new product. So maybe we give it an X as an extra one. And this here again is your lead time. And you multiply that by the demand. So you have this here term, that is your normal order. The time that you spend, that you have between getting your orders in the factory, which is basically how much product do you want in your factory, and for this, how often do you order and how much do you really want in your factory. You've got all kinds of things like the economic order quantity and the cost of inventory, and it really depends on how much room is it in a truck and how far is your supplier and do we have any cost in keeping the material versus ordering every time. That's a different topic. Plus, of course, this lead time. And you want this whole period times your average. And these are, by the way, these are those averages. And so your average lead time plus your average demand. And that all basically should keep you on this lower bar. If that would all be true every time, you would just zigzag up and down and every time hit this stripe, this punctuated line over here. But you add to the inventory that you want to buy, so to what you want to buy, you add also that this is where you want to go, but you also add the safety stock. And that is the point to which you order again. That is, you check how much do I have? Okay, I want to reach this as a maximum. So that whole formula is basically this line. That crossed line is this whole formula together, and that's where the safety stock gets into your by now completely messed up graph of how you manage how much inventory you buy. Now there are different systems for this. If you really want to go exactly on the borders of your industry and performance, do go a couple of steps further. But I would say for all your basic inventory, all those little consumer goods that you also need in your operation, just use this. And with that I mean the soap and the towels and the stuff like that. Definitely go for this. But also for products that are not so difficult, right? So they have a normal market to buy from. They also have a normal demand, more or less normal demand in your factory. Very good way to just calculate how much you need and stop thinking about the problem of ordering and start thinking about the problem of producing effectively. So there you have it, some explanation on the safety stock, slightly combined with the reorder quantity, but that really would require a different video. Do, by the way, let me know if you want some more info on all these economic order quantities and the reorder point or the reorder time, these types of inventory management. Drop me a comment. I'm not too sure if this is relevant information for you, my viewers. I use it, so probably yes, but let me know which points of this inventory management are more interesting to you. And for now, I just hope that you enjoyed this video about the safety stock. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe. I mean, I hope I've reached my 1,000 by now, but that is only the beginning. I love to serve you through these videos. So letting me know that you like the video and like my channel is a really nice piece of feedback to me. For now, I wish you the best of luck with your inventory management. And as always, enjoy the journey.